Welcome to the Tilted Roll Podcast.
Yes, hello.
We are your podcast masters. My name is Marshall.
And I am Francisco.
And today, the last, I guess in a way, I guess we're kind of going back in somewhat to the first episode.
Yes.
The first episode, we talked a lot about the kind of getting started, going into maybe things you could do when you're really trying to get your feet wet into Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Then the second episode, we went a little more complicated. We went a lot into the storytelling aspect of things.
Oh, yeah, we said a lot about our own characters and all that fun jazz.
Oh yes, well, all the fun stories. But today we are going to be talking about. That was me hitting the chair.
Sure.
Yeah, my nails. No, today we are going to be talking about the first character that you ever do, and little more than just like kind of what we did with the getting started. Like, we're not going to be talking about the nitty gritty of like what exactly, how specifically to make the character. Like, we're not going over necessarily how to do the roles and stuff like that, but just kind of the expectations and things that you should maybe be aware of when you're kind of playing / trying to think of a character to pick, rather than just like the stats themselves, because we're not very stat oriented players
when we don't want to be. Yeah,
right. It does happen sometimes.
Yeah.
You get caught up in it. You want to, there's some points where you kind of like, man, if I was only just a little stronger.
Yeah, it's the curse of knowing what you're doing in a way.
It very much is a curse. When you get really into it, it is very hard not to kind of become like a little bit of a stat, wannabe.
Right, you're just like, I want to play easier, so I'm gonna do this, and then
I don't want to die.
Exactly.
Or I feel like if I'm not the most optimal, I will die, which is a lie you tell yourself as a skilled player, which you have to avoid.
Unless you're playing with a certain DM where that is the case. But those games are often a lot of fun.
Yeah, but and this is the thing though, is even then, like, those aren't necessarily the most fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's nice to be able to play a campaign where you can maybe be suboptimal, quote unquote, but then still, kind of have like live, thrive. Maybe you kind of get your butt kicked a little every now and then, but maybe you have something else that at least you can tip your hat on.
That's true. Yeah. Well, what we were going to talk about was our first impressions on opening the player's handbook for the first time.
Yes. So the benefit of us doing part of an actual video podcast again for this episode is now I can bring in props.
Look at that.
Like this one. This is not actually the first book I ever looked at, but this is essentially the edition of the first time that I looked in a book. This is the 3rd edition player's handbook.
Right.
I actually started at 3.5, which for those of you who don't know, essentially they came out with 3rd edition and people were like, there's some cool things, but there's also a lot of things that don't look like they were tested maybe that well. Maybe you should go back to the drawing board very slightly and adjust some things. And they did. And then they made 3.5, which looks a little bit different than this in terms of its style. There wasn't a lot of books made for 3rd edition only. There was very few. So that is the benefit, though, of going between if you tried playing 3.5, was a lot of things were available that were 3.5 specific, or since they were their own rule sets and new things anyway. Oop, I never plugged in my computer. But yeah, so since they, were kind of trying to do two things at once.
Right.
Since the other books kind of set their own rules, they were kind of set better than the player's handbook itself was. So, but this is the 3rd. I started with 3.5. This is the 3rd edition, but looking back at this, especially recently, like, this actually is like super trippy. There's actually a character generator. Yeah, in the back.
What?
There is a character generator. I have tried it. It's not that good.
Oh.
It's like a super basic one. It's one of those, I think there was like, I don't know. It was very basic. It is of its time. Let's see. When was this edition released specifically?
Back when, jeez.
Let's see. I'm trying to find the copyright here.
Can I see this real quick?
Hold on. I want to find. Where's the trademark? Give me a year. Give me something, Wizards.
While he's looking for that, like, this is all new to me. I started with 5e just because it was the most accessible version at the time.
I was gonna say the character generator is a demo disc, by the way.
That's a call out to another show that we can't talk about.
But you have to buy the full character generator. That's why it's not as good.
That's weird. But 5e doesn't have this because I think they recognize now that not many people have home computers where they can do that. It's all just phones. But it's really cool if you think about it. Back then, a lot of people used to do that, where you would buy a book and then, oh, hey, here's a companion CD that you can put into your computer or to your CD player, and all that fun jazz.
Yeah, I don't remember offhand, and I can't find a year in this at all about when 3rd edition first came out. But yeah, my first look at a D&D book was 3.5. I was in high school. I was a sophomore. Yeah. So 4th edition had come out then, but my friend, he was like, hey, I want to play Dungeons and Dragons, and I was like, I've never heard of it, I'd heard of it, but I've never played it before, and I wasn't really super big into tabletop RPGs. I was, video games. So I play video games.
Yeah.
But I was like, sure, you know what? Like, he was, one of my best friends in high school. I was, yeah, absolutely, and because he was 2 of my other friends were going to be going to play it, so obviously I knew everyone. I wasn't going to be around like people I don't know, so it was really easy for me just to be like, yeah, absolutely, like I totally want to play. And I opened that, and so one day, it was while we were in the music hall, one day in rehearsal, he came in with the 3.5 book, and I was just like, wow, like it's just like, when you look at it the first time, like you just see like, certain artworks of like different classes, like, and like here, you open it here, like you can see like there's a bunch of different types of artwork. I'll throw up some B-roll up here at some point, but all of these things that were kind of available. But the one thing that stuck out to me the most was this image right here, which is of the sorcerer with all his belts and lack of shirt. But this image was like, I saw this and I was like, oh yeah, I want to play this. Like, I want to play this character specifically. And because it's interesting. You see like he's carrying what looks like a spear, a crossbow, not necessarily maybe things that you would think of with a sorcerer.
That's true.
However, there's definitely the need for it in things like 3.5 and 3rd edition, because you run out of spells real quick, and cantrips aren't as useful. Like things like, if you're a 5th edition veteran, you may think of things like, oh, look, Chill Touch. Like, that's a very standard cantrip that you can cast whenever at any range. Nope. 3.5, baby. It's actually a touch spell. Weirdly enough.
Right.
And it's not a cantrip. It is a level 1 spell.
It's always fun playing with you on certain campaigns and games, and then you referencing some of the older rules.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's what I first learned, and like but like the way that just the book was designed was huge in inspiring like how interested in the game I was. And it was like one of the things, because obviously in video games, one of the things I always loved about any video game was being able to make your own character.
Oh yeah,
like being able to have custom characters and like RPGs that you can make and do whatever with was huge. But I never felt like, at least in the ones that I always was available to play with, I never felt like one really hit the right notes that like I wanted to, because I hadn't played Oblivion by this point. Like I never played Oblivion, at least at that point in time. I have now,
right.
But Skyrim was like was going to be my first Elder Scrolls game, and this was before Skyrim came out. But yeah, so yeah, like I really enjoyed playing Skyrim, or no, sorry, I've totally getting. My like that happened, that distraction happened, and that totally ruined my train of thought.
We are trained professionals.
Yes, we're really good at what we do. No, so I really hadn't played a game that really hit kind of this note the way that I wanted, that I had ever seen before. I think the closest game I had played at that point was Fable 2. That really kind of hit the type of note that I wanted in terms of like the ability of like fantasy, or at least just being able to do like sword fighting, magic, maybe a gun or a crossbow, stuff like that. Like Fable 2 kind of hit close enough, but like it just didn't feel, it didn't feel like I would ingrain enough of myself. Like I really liked the idea of making like a character from scratch and like, having like a backstory and these ideas. Like I would kind of set my own backstories in a lot of games, but obviously they're not set in the game. I would just kind of come up with them and then just play them as if I had those tendencies or whatever. And then all of a sudden I'm shown, Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm like, oh my God, like this is exactly what, in terms of like RPG and character building, like this is exactly what I've been looking for. And that's kind of why, like I've said this a bunch of times to people, like in terms of like games as a whole that are like perfect for me, like D&D is like the perfect game for me. It's not a video game, obviously, so there are some issues in needing it to be multiplayer. But single player games are very hard, not as fun. But they are. It is definitely though a big factor is that like you could. It was just like it hit everything that I really liked in kind of an RPG that I couldn't get in a video game. And now there have been other games that have come out and somewhat satiated that, but D&D still stands out as like, and like when I read it the first time, like it was like love at first sight. Like I really hit it like super hard, and I didn't have the greatest first session, which we'll talk about in a second. But what were your first impressions?
My first impressions. Well, I started with, like I said a little bit before, I started with 5e, and I was actually supposed to start back when 5e first came out during high school.
Well, no. So 5e came out in 2014. I looked at. I saw this the other day. I was watching. Yeah, I was reading about the history of 5e. It came out in 2014.
2014. Oh,
there might have been playtesting, and I think playtesting started in 2011.
Oh, okay. Well,
The first published book though was 2014.
Yeah. Well, I did remember seeing at least that sometime when I was in high school somehow. So I might just be getting time wrong. However, opening it up, I remember looking at that being completely overtaken by the information in there because I wanted to do so much. Copyright
is 2014.
Right? When I started 2 years ago, actually playing again, my friend Chris, who is DMing a game for me right now, he lent me his book so that my sister and I could make characters. And I'm looking through this and I'm thinking, I want to do all of these things all at once. Why do I have to pick one?
I want to be every class.
Exactly. But which is why my first character was a bard, because you have
jack of all trades,
pretty much. And a lot of things went into picking out that first character, but just looking in the book and seeing how in depth everything got was pretty great. There was a lot of things I didn't know at that time, like dark vision made no sense to me. Ability score modifiers, like what are those? And just overall skills and modifiers, I was just completely lost in. But
yeah, that was something I struggled a lot with. A big thing that I struggled with in 3.5 was back then kind of how trying to set up the bonuses and like modifiers to attack rolls. Like for some reason I couldn't get it stuck in my head what the base attack bonus and adding all of your other proficiency or whatever would do to like add to your attack roll and your damage roll. Like I could never remember those, even though especially damage roll, it's just as easy as it is now, it was just your ability modifier. It wasn't that hard to remember. For some reason I could never like have that stick.
And I'm just thinking of just how the books seem so large, like so big, not just in size and actual size, but like how much content was in there and how you open up like, how do I get through all this? And now, having played for so long, you're just like, okay, I need to look for items. It's right here. I need to look for feats. It's right here. Spells back here. All that fun jazz. We know where everything is in this book because we've referenced this how many times? Countless. Throughout all of our games as either players or DM.
Oh man, I've turned to the greatest page, the one that has Electrum pieces.
Which I've used before, and they're always great.
I've never used that. I've never seen anyone use that even.
I named an entire order of knights after them.
But that's one thing. That's not the actual currency being used
I
and
know.
traded.
And I also used the Electrum coins in that campaign. You were in that briefly. You
Yeah,
just
but
never,
I never got the Electrum.
you never got a chance to use them.
Nope. I was there. I think I had 2 sessions.
Oh yeah,
2 or 3.
Fun character though. But all in all, just these books are always so great to look at, and I have interest in looking at the older books too, like fourth edition. My girlfriend accidentally bought the 4th edition Player's Handbook instead of the 5th edition one.
Yes.
And I looked at it briefly,
Classic.
and I was like, okay, I understand this, and I don't understand that.
Yeah, no, yeah. 4th edition was a weird. It was very divisive for a lot of people. A lot of people who had never played D&D liked it more than 3.5, because it was obviously easier to understand. And people who weren't as into the fantasy setting, or at least like hardcore RPG ideas, really enjoyed kind of the video gamey aspect that was 4th edition. It was very good for one-offs. Very good for kind of having like super epic battles, but not as good for like the role playing aspect. Not as much as kind of, there was less like ingraining into the world, like it was a lot more about just like, ooh, let me get in there and fight. Let me fight minions. Minions was something that I wish came back. That was fun. You could probably do it one way or another in 5th edition, but minions was always fun.
I'm sure there's some sort of homebrew.
You could just probably travel. I mean, it wouldn't be an item. Just like minions are just like, it would be just the DM coming up with that concept. Just like, I mean, that's all it is. It's just a swarm of things. You're just giving them a mutual health of essentially whatever, like essentially 1. So it's just like, I swing at this minion swarm. Well, that has 1 health. So you just swing at it. As long as you hit, you clear that lot of minions. And it was just fun. It wasn't meant to be like inherently challenging. It was just meant to almost kind of be like a stumbling block. So either like, there is somebody there, you have to fight them, but these minions are in your way.
Right.
Things like that. Like that was always interesting. Or you could have like 6, maybe it wouldn't be a swarm. Maybe it would just be like, these are 6 creatures, but they're all minions. So they all have 1 health, but they can still come and hit you. So you can just swat them away, no problem. But they will come and get in your way all the time. Which was interesting. It gave you fun combat flexibilities as a DM.
I don't know, man. I need my role play.
Well, yes, I'm just saying it definitely, it wasn't as strong for that, but it was there. I mean, obviously it was still there. It just, was better at the time, at least. Your better role playing option was 3.5.
Oh yeah.
But a lot of people, especially newer players, liked 4E because of how simple it was. Combat was very easy to understand, and you could do a lot of cool stuff. And in a way, some people kind of looked at that as, since you don't have to worry about combat as much, then the role play stuff kicks in. But because of that, you also couldn't really like figuring out how to do some of the like other out of combat stuff that are skill related. Maybe were a little weirder, and there just wasn't as much like stuff set up for like the way campaign settings and stuff are set up now is way different than it was in 4E. But it was not horrible. A lot of people, I am of the opinion that it was not horrible. I enjoyed 3.5 more, but it was not like the worst thing on the planet.
And
I'd play 4E way over 2nd edition. Sorry, hardcore fanboys out there, fangirls, or in between, in between.
I can't say I played 2nd edition or 1st edition.
I have played a very small amount of 2nd edition, and I hated it.
Oh,
I didn't like.
What's this, Marshall?
I did not like THAC0. It was very. That was a little newer than 2, I guess, to be fair. But it was very complicated. I felt way more limited than even 3.5 early on, and I didn't want to keep going. Like I just was like, it's one like yeah, sure, it might get better as you become a higher level, but I don't want to. I would like to enjoy the way up. At least with 3.5, it may be harder to ride your way up, but you still enjoy the ride. It's just a little bumpy. But yeah, so still overall, first impressions, I really love. Like, yeah, I fell in love with this game the second I opened that book. Like, it was very quick. I just like. I mean, I always liked fantasy. I always liked RPGs.
Same.
So like this was a no-brainer, really, to like get into.
And just at least for that book, just being able to decidedly pick out a character and then be able to do this terrible, like not adhering to the rules at all first game, that was terribly fun.
Oh yeah, no, I had a very experienced DM my first game, so it was pretty to the T.
Oh, yeah, no, we all kind of just figured it out. To be honest, let's see. One thing you don't usually see in the podcast is that
well, you say you didn't have your phone open, so I couldn't see what our like you didn't have anything open, so it was kind of like. And usually, the thing you should never do for a podcast is have all your equipment behind you and not face it. Unfortunately, due to our circumstances, this is where we're at. So,
oh yeah, but yeah. So, tell me about your first character, my dude.
Oh yes. So okay. So let's ride this train all the way back to 3.5 again. Back to this was 2011. So
back to the past.
So there was a
terrible blizzard.
It was definitely 3.5 had been out, and so had 4th edition. Actually, 4th edition had been out for 3 years.
Yeah, 3.5 didn't have that big of a time span.
It was because of let's see. Well, I mean, it had about the same as let's see. I think the thing was, this 5th edition only had came out in 2014, essentially because they had play tested it so much. Mm-hmm. Like again, they started play testing it in 2011, I think, and then that was so many years of play testing. Like it's crazy, but that was the big reason that 5th edition worked so well.
Right.
But yeah, 3rd edition was definitely marred by the need to switch from 3rd edition to 3.5. It was very much kind of got stuck by that. And obviously D&D really wasn't as popular as it had been in something like the 80s, and it really kind of wasn't at its peak anymore. But it still is to me, still very good. I look at it very fondly. And yeah, but my first character went all the way. Yep, I went to the sorcerer page, and I was like, oh my god, this is exactly what I want to look like. Except I played an elf. So even then, I was on the was I an elf? I think I was a human. I pretty much just copied. I pretty much just went with this guy that's on here.
I like how you asked as if I would know this.
No, but I was asking myself. I was trying to remember. But yeah, no, I gave him a small backstory. I gave him. Oh, that's right. You did have cantrips were spells per day. That's right. Man, again, every time I open this book, the last 2 days or so since we've been preparing for this episode, it's been taking me back. But yeah, I mean, I just was like, I'll pick a sorcerer. I guess this guy's human, so I'll just pick human. I don't really know. And let's see, I'm trying to remember his name. I can't remember it off the top of my head. But I started with him, and then I made him, and I went over to my friend's house, who actually lived very close to me at the time, not where I live now. Mm-hmm. And I walked on over there, and it was very interesting to say the least. I would not recommend a spellcaster every time if you're playing 3.5 for the first time, if for your first D&D ever, if it is 3.5, I would not necessarily the most recommend a spellcaster, at least like a sorcerer or wizard, because I was not prepared for how little of anything I would do. But if because you only get so many spells, obviously you don't know a lot of spells. And so essentially I didn't fully understand what cantrips did or whatever, what certain areas did, and didn't realize kind of how limited, that's one of the things you may look at that and be like, oh, that's fine. I could probably use that many spells, within a day. And then you actually try getting into a combat and you're like, oh no, yeah, I'm out of spells. And nothing bad happened to them. In fact, it actually had it had one of my favorite moments in any D&D, which was a moment where where I got to the first time quote a Lord of the Rings in a D&D session. So in my first session, I was already quoting Lord of the Rings, but it was because we were on this puzzle and we fell down this hole. It was like a large kind of cylinder hole, and the stairs were starting to retract, but there was a hole in. So we were like climbing up. We climbed down the stairs, spiraled down, and then we had to come back up.
Right.
Well, because we grabbed the thing that was down there, now the stairs were starting to come in. So we had to run up. We were able to run up pretty far, but then about halfway through was some of the stairs were split. So, and I didn't have a crazy amount of strength, but we were just there and we tried it anyway. And so he looked at me and it was great. I guess it wasn't my quote, but now that I remember correctly, it wasn't my quote, but in my first session we had a Lord of the Rings quote, which was because his character was a dwarf. My friend's character was a dwarf cleric, and he just looked at me and was like, "You have to toss me." And that was definitely like one of the best. That was definitely like the best thing about that session as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
But turned myself down a little too much. My bad. But yeah, no, that was like the best part about that was it was just a solid moment. It was super fun. I did make it as well. I had a high DC because I think my strength was like a 10 or 11.
Right.
So I had like no extra modifier to help me out. And it was, but like I made it and I threw him over and then I jumped over and we made it out. It was really interesting and it was super fun. But I played that character one time and then after that I realized I was like, I don't know about that. I was like, I was not sure about this. And then I saw how in that session my friend that invited me was doing with his fighter. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, I want to do that. And then I played a fighter. And the next time, in the actual campaign start, we did the next time. So sadly, that sorcerer did not last. No. But I learned a lot more while playing that fighter. I also learned how kind of boring fighters were
back then. Now they're just broken.
Well,
with their extra feats.
In a lot of classes can be though.
That's true.
College of Swords bard that gets broke as all hell.
I mean, speaking of bards, my first character.
Yes, you played the bard.
Yes. When I first picked up the book and decided on what to actually be, I decided to make Nero Obsoletus, which is a very blatant wrestling reference. To anybody who in the know, they will know why that is.
Is it Macho Man Randy Savage?
No, it isn't. It's something something modern. Like if you're familiar.
So Rey Mysterio.
No. All right, so listen. Just because I'm Hungarian does not mean I go for the foreign ones automatically.
Oh, I mean that wasn't why. It's just I picked my two classic and semi-classic best wrestlers.
The only two he knows.
No, actually, well, my number one, but he counts as both classic, modern, and current, which is the Undertaker. He has transcended time.
Yeah, he's not giving up anytime soon.
I mean, he's undead. Why wouldn't he?
That's true. But yeah,
he lives forever.
So Nero was his half elf bard. Yes, half elf bard, College of Valor. Back before Xanathars came out, so we only had the two choices really. Mm-hmm. It was great. It was back when we had no idea what we were doing, so we were like everything was, we get to add this and this expertise. I just doubled the score, so I have like an 18 in my persuasion skill. So I would always try to persuade everything to do it. I think I persuaded a zombie to follow us for a time. And the DM didn't want to come up with a clever name for him, so he called him Bob. So we had Bob the zombie for a while. He got inflicted with the mummy curse.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so he was stuck at 1 HP for about 3 days. Until we realized that the paladin in our party could cure that.
Well, you learn these things, especially when you were all learning at the same time, right?
Yeah, we all were.
Oh, yeah,
so it's just like, you could have cured this the entire time. And we paid this man 1,000 gold to get this done.
1,000. Oh my god.
Yeah.
But that's better than. I mean, to be fair though, since that was your first time, that's better than somebody who has played the game for a significant amount of time, but yet doesn't use his smites ever when he was a paladin. That is a reference to a friend we know,
Oh yeah.
who played a paladin for quite some time and just would refuse to use his smites and really any ability. Like, he was just a fighter essentially as a paladin. Like, it was like, why are you even a paladin if you're not going to use any of the abilities?
It's like, I don't know, man.
I mean-
This works.
I mean, to be fair, it's not something that is uncommon for that guy as a player. So
That's true. That's true. Well, yes. He ended up having a kid somehow. We assumed
how long did you play this character?
Well, he played the character for the better part of the summer, pretty much, or at least that campaign. We assume he had a kid because he did get it on with a bartender, and I mean, back then, what
I mean,
are you
that
gonna
depends.
use?
Depends on well. First of all, contraception has existed since the Roman times.
Listen, man, I don't want to stick my thing
So-
into crocodile skin.
It was lambs usually. First of all,
Okay.
and second of all, hey man,
Hey,
it's all about it's all about not having to worry about them kids. Am I right? Hey.
Hey. All right, we're getting off topic here.
But yeah,
But
I mean, still.
towards the end, he fought off a Balor by convincing it that they weren't any trouble and that it wasn't worth killing them. And he stole this guy's red gloves, and that's
Is
about
that
all.
still when you were operating essentially a plus 18 to your roll?
Yeah,
And what level were you?
He ended at level 7.
Oh my god.
Level 7, we're facing this giant Balor, being really close to the mic right there. I apologize for
It's
that.
okay. You just keep you want to kind of just peter yourself as we go, you know?
Right? It's
Talking normally, you want to be real close. It's when you really want to yell it out there that you back up.
essentially, yes. But that character was so much fun. I tried recreating him but knowing the rules now is just not the same.
Well, no, you're right. You can't. But I mean, like, you still essentially could go into that type of personality and stuff. Like, cause I've had the idea of like recreating, cause I kind of remember parts of like I wanted to make that one sorcerer that way, but that's kind of the other thing. It's like, I think, cause I didn't play him that much either, I'm not inherently as attached to him. The one I'm more attached to is the actual consistent character I played, which was the one right after that, where he was a half elf fighter. And it was, he was just really fun and cool to play with. It was nice to kind of have like just a nice, I think I had a half plate. And yeah, just being able to like just be super high defense and just kind of, it wasn't like, ooh, I do all these things at once. It was like, I hit him, he's dead. Like, just simple, but you know what? That creature's dead. That evil creature, he's dead now.
Oh yeah,
I have done my job.
he's deader than dead. He
Yeah.
is mega dead.
And now
It's
I
60
cleave to hit his friend.
Right.
What's cleaving? Oh, well, the joys that you don't know. But yeah, no, I mean, the first characters were always really fun.
Oh yeah.
Um,
All right. But speaking about characters and classes, Marshall, my friend,
yes.
my compatriot, my business partner, arguably.
So anyway, but moving on from the whole character topic, we've spent a lot of time on that. But one of the big questions a lot of people may ask themselves when they're thinking of like, oh, let me, I don't really know what I'm doing. Maybe, hey, DM who invited me or friend who invited me, what does the party need? Maybe should I do that? And like, maybe if you're worried about like, if you're trying to already think like, if you already, are video gamey and whatnot, trying to think of like party diversity,
Mm-hmm.
But you haven't played before. My recommendation personally would be maybe not to worry about that as much.
No, definitely not.
Um,
Especially with this newer edition.
Yeah, like, I mean, yeah, especially now, because like, I mean, if in 3.5, maybe that'd be a question you could ask somebody who, if you haven't played before, because maybe you're like, well, what do you guys kind of already have? Because like there was a big difference between what a cleric could do for healing and what a bard could do. Like they both could cast Cure Light Wounds, but the way that, or the amount that a cleric could do for healing as a whole compared to a bard had a lot more options. Whereas in 5th edition, the fact that both a cleric and a bard can cast Healing Word and Cure Wounds, they are actually even. Like if they, a cleric with 14 wisdom and a bard with 14 charisma, they will heal the exact, potentially, if they get the same roll, they'll heal the exact same amount.
The possibility's there.
The only thing that makes a cleric inherently possibly better at healing is if they're a life cleric. They choose the life domain, but that's it. That's all. That is the only amount. Otherwise, like inherently, still a cleric in 3.5, even if there are other domains, would still have more options, ways and options to heal the party than something like a bard. And that was kind of the one thing about that. But especially now, like if you're playing 5th edition as a first timer, it definitely, I don't think is worth trying to sacrifice essentially the thing that you want to play for, like, just trying to get party diversity, especially before you really know, like, what it does.
Essentially, right. My 2 cents about the whole topic is that it happens more often than not where you would have players just come up to you, even as from the DM's perspective, having people come up to you do that, it's I don't know, it's hard to explain to them, like, you can play whatever you want. They're like, we don't know what we want to play. And
it's really easy to get bogged down by choices. So I mean, if you ask for recommendations, that's one thing,
right?
But like, and you can, like, if you can't think of anything, if there's so much stuff, like, then like to go based on the recommendation. But if try to find something. You'll find it much more worth it than just playing something that you are told to play.
That's true. Yeah. Like, but if you're in the party with 3 other druids and you decide to be a druid, that can work now.
It can. And I mean, that's the thing though. It's also like, I mean, you could still do that in 3.5. Like it's just, in any of the other editions, you may not be the most successful, and you may not like do the best in certain situations, but potentially, hopefully, you can see those coming and avoid them, or just, hopefully maybe be able to survive and try again. Right. Try again later.
Although that brings up the point where a party of warlocks would just be a party of different archetypes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that could be true for a number of other classes. But honestly, like one of the most important things, like, because like the thing is, I think trying to focus on something like party diversity is really complicated. Right. And I think something you really need to focus on when you're starting out is like really just trying to keep it as simple as possible. And in the school I go to for video and like TV, we have a rule that's called the KISS rule. But I'm going to change it for you all so you guys can use the KISS rule. But we're not as rude as our rough and tough college instructors. So I'm gonna it's KISS is an acronym that stands for Keep It Simple, Silly. It is not actually silly, and the way we learned it, it was definitely stupid. Right. But I want to think of us as we're like, you're our viewers, you're our friends, you're our mates. Right. So I don't want to be as rude to you guys. I mean, how maybe to him I'll be rude.
Right. I mean, to you, this is just to Marshall right here, and you can cut this out after this. Like, for me, it's always just keep it simple, shithead. Mm-hmm. But all right, just because of my prior training.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so the big thing a lot of things that it's really easy to look at, like all the stuff that's available to you, online in the books. Like, there's so many books. But honestly, like if you can try to keep it as like one-dimensional, I guess, in a way as possible. Mm-hmm. By that I mean, like, so for example, like say your friend is inviting you to come play Dungeons and Dragons. Well, then maybe, if you don't have any of the books, and you're just like, and he's like, my friend, like, here, you can borrow my player's handbook, and he just handed me the, here, I'll grab the actual one.
You got this. There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, he just handed me like a player's handbook. Okay. Yep. And like this is all I went off of. There were a bunch of books available for 3.5 by then. Like there are so many. And, but like I just, obviously like I wasn't going to really be worried about all of them. But, if you're somebody that like is kind of being shown like a bunch of books and be like, hey, go buy your first one, and like you see like, and if you're at a GameStop and you're like, I want to buy a book, like I want to get started and I want to buy a book, you may see this one, but then you'll see the Dungeon Master's Guide, the, Xanathar's, Mordekainen's Tome of Foes. But, maybe just worry, even if you're the richest person in the world or whatnot, just worry about getting this one.
Essentially, this guy, this has everything you need, and I couldn't talk for like 3 seconds. But another quick thing I like to mention is that when you're walking into someplace, and partly what you were saying, like I've noticed this from just my collection of books from what I've got. Every time I walk in, I just see the row of books just for 5th edition. Now, everything just kind of like fades in with one another, and I'm just sitting there like, where's Mordekainen's? I need Mordekainen. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, obviously this they're designed, at least in the spine, very similarly. Right. But that is, you can very easily kind of get like overwhelmed by a lot of information. If you can just keep it to the player's handbook, or if you're given like a starter set or something like that, then like just go from there and stick with that one thing that you've got. Or if you just are going to your friend's house and they have a player's handbook, just stick with that, because you don't want to be like sitting there trying to like juggle all these books. Like, oh, I need to go into this book. Oh, where is it? I think it's in this book. Like, you're just starting. You don't need to be juggling all these books and everything. Keep it like calm. Keep it simple.
Right. Keep
silly.
Essentially, he said it all. Like, you don't need to take on everything right then and there.
If you wanted to do something that maybe goes outside of it, like one thing maybe you could do is like if you have a friend, or if you want to get a friend into it and you have a D&D Beyond like account, maybe if you do like the campaign, like you start a campaign on D&D Beyond, if you're a subscriber and like you can share like your stuff, if you have stuff on D&D Beyond, then like that can help them.
Oh yeah.
Because you could just, if anything, you could just either buy for them or help them buy the specific things that they want to play, but then at least they can just read the things that they want online, and then once they make their character sheet and everything, all of the relevant information is right there. Then if you can have something like, if they want to start as like, a College of Swords bard, then like they can do that, because it's going to be all right there. All the information that they need is going to be right on D&D Beyond, right on their character sheet. They don't have to even look in a book. They can just go right from their sheet.
Right.
Then it's a little more simple, but that's because that site you pay to specifically have something for ease. Whereas like if you all you have are the books, or you're trying and you don't want to get them all the stuff from D&D Beyond, or you don't want to buy stuff from D&D Beyond, then just try to stick to one book.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I can't tell you how happy I am to have spent so much money for that.
Oh, the D&D Beyond stuff?
Yeah. It's made things so much easier. Like whenever, even I find that even now, like when I need a character for a game that I've suddenly been invited to, like that day is like, you're level 5, make a character now. I used to take like an hour or so to just come up with something.
Yeah.
And now it's just like,
at least they may, if anything, make a decision. Yeah. But one thing in that realm, if you kind of are trying to either simply make the character or whatnot, is the quick start section. If you are looking at a book, like when you are looking at the book, it is very helpful.
Listen, Marshall, I can't tell you how many times that quick start has saved my life and a player's life. That for a game I was DMing, especially back when I was in training, we would have some downtime. We would play D&D. A lot of the guys there always had interest in them. None of them knew how to play it. So they always wanted to know which characters to make, and I would always point to the quick start option in the player's handbook for 5e. Ooh, that was close. Off camera, you didn't see this, but that book almost...
Yeah, through the third edition player's handbook, and then almost kind of fell over.
But yeah, you can find the quick start...
quick build,
quick build.
It's right at the beginning of any section.
Yeah, right below the class features, and it just explains like what's the recommended, background, the recommended stats that you can go for, the first one, the second one, and it's really great when they just want to tell you, I want to play this, I don't know what's good for it. It's like, do this and this. It says in the book, just follow that. And every time I tell someone what they should play, they think, oh man, this guy knows everything. In reality, I just reference the quick build every single time.
Yeah, for like here, I'll read one for example. It'll be the cleric, the one I held up earlier there. Quick build is only a couple sentences. It's just, you can make a cleric quickly by following these suggestions. First, wisdom should be your highest ability score, followed by strength or constitution. Second, choose the acolyte background. And then from there, you just go right to the beginning of the class features where they'll tell you like what your hit points are going to be, your proficiencies are, and then it'll have equipment. And that's like all right there kind of at the beginning. So you only really need to go to this first page to really get all of the info you need. Because obviously like you just pick the background later, but again, you can just, all right, I'll go to acolyte. And that way I know what those skills are going to be. And then I know what these skills are going to be.
And it just goes to show how much care and time went into this edition.
I mean, they've had it before.
Oh, yeah.
Like they have it in here. Like they actually have more, because they actually will have, they have even more actually. It's more in depth, like everything in 3rd edition, everything made overly complicated. Just for the sake of me having it there. But like, for example, here I'm at the fighter page here.
Go for it.
But like it'll have like a dwarven fighter starting package. So it'll tell you which ranks to put into certain skills, what feats to take, what your bonus feat should be, the gear to take, what gold you would start with. Another one will be if you're a human, elf, half-elf, or half-orc fighter start. Like this actually even goes like a little more in depth on that, but that's because also like there was more to setting up certain parts of your characters. Like skills were more complicated in 3.5 and 3rd edition than they are now. So it obviously needed to be that way, because like your race would a lot of times make more difference to your class than maybe they do now. So that's why. But it definitely though is like very much like that section as a whole. It's always been around, but it's because of how useful it is.
It is. And so listen, if you need a quick character, quick build. If you've done this before, here's a little tip to you, because I just want to mention this on the podcast because we've talked about this and a lot of people forget they can do this. You all know you can make custom backgrounds, right? Like this is going to a different subject. For the
getting there anyway.
Yeah, for backgrounds. When you make a character, you're making a background. You pick a background as well to like describe where your character comes from. It gives your personality traits, your bonds, and your flaws, and also some extra goodies like skill proficiencies you might not have, a language you might know or two if you decide to be that type of background. However, just a quick little mention, not gonna go too far into the detail because that's its own little show, its own little topic for another podcast, is that you can make your custom background. All you have to do is say, "Oh, I'm this." You just pick a certain amount of skill proficiencies, and then a tool proficiency or language, and then you pick whichever feature from the other backgrounds.
And if you do, like, this is obviously this advice isn't for first time players.
No.
But if you do have the Dungeon Master's Guide, it labels it more specifically in there how to make it. Otherwise, there's I think a brief note in it here in the
definitely.
Player's Handbook.
They only gave it like 3 paragraphs.
However, it is very useful for one thing that is very useful for if you are going to be starting your first character is looking at the character background and kind of what that means. Because like obviously like that's the thing is like they give you skills, they will give you proficiencies, and if you have certain backgrounds like that can change kind of what things you start with, and well obviously it changes the money that you start with, but definitely. It can change like what kind of tools you have at the beginning. Like if you want to play a thiefy person, well if you start as a former soldier, you're not going to necessarily maybe start with some of the things that you want, and depending on the class you are. It's very dependent. That's why it's good to read those. I mean, that's why you'll see in the quick start why it mentioned like, a background to choose. Especially because like when you're choosing your skills, a big thing that you can kind of forget is like with your background, you get those skills that you get are like free skills essentially.
Right.
So like, say, you can get history between your background and your class as a skill. Well, you get it with your background. So why would you pick that as your class skill? Doesn't make sense. You inherently you can't.
Right.
But that's why it's really good to, like, once you pick the class, before you finalize on your skills, go to your background. Figure out what your background's going to be. Pick that. Mark down what skills you get from your background, and go back to your character, and then see whatever you have to finish. And then then if you read like, hey, I could have picked history, but my background gave me history, so now I'll take perception. And that will help you out a lot more as a first time player. Is kind of, you'll need to do a little bit of swapping, but if you can, once you pick the class, just you have the class set, you kind of know how you want to play them. Just go right to that background section in the book, pick which one. That way, you know exactly anything else that you may start with, and that way you don't double up on accident from your class. You have everything marked down that you are given. Now you can make the choices and start going from there.
And then, of course, you have the options for the other books. I believe Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide really uses the same properties as the backgrounds given to you in a player's handbook, but they have different background features.
Yeah, and I think they have some that are unique.
Yeah, they have, I want to say, really they only have one that's unique, the Far Traveler background, which is always nice. It's what I'm using right now for another campaign I'm doing. I'm in a lot of campaigns, ladies and gentlemen. It's just,
well, we both are. We have no life.
This is the best time of my life in reality.
Well, I mean, that's why. But at the same time, that's why we do this show, is because of how much like this, how invested we are in this just as a game. Like, the main reason we really wanted to do this stuff, and like this kind of is a good recap note.
Oh yeah.
A main reason why we really wanted to do all this stuff is because, of how our first experience at this game impacted us. Like, for both of us, like we took so much from the first time we played this game. Even though for me, the first time I played, the first character I played, all that stuff, like maybe it didn't stick. For you it did. Like, you really enjoyed your character.
Oh yeah.
Just even though that we're broken because you weren't playing the game right.
No.
But that's the thing. It's like, this game is so much about just whatever you make it and the interesting aspects that you put into it. Like, there isn't necessarily a right or wrong way to play this game. And that's what's so good about it. Because like we were, maybe you'll get unlucky and you'll find people that are super, super big rule, stingy people. They need you to be exact. You can't do anything wrong. But we were fortunate enough to, like, you had players and a DM who didn't know what they were doing.
Right. I
had a DM and players, and at least one player who did know what they were doing, but they were both very relaxed about stuff. The one player, my friend, and it was his stepdad who was the DM. He was maybe a little stingy on his dad stepdad following the rules. But it's kind of because, like, they had a list of issues, but a lot of it was, he would more try to, like, fight the DM trying to do things that he shouldn't do.
Right.
But they were nice about it as for us, since we were still just learning, they would both just let a bunch of things slide. Like, he'd be like, okay, in the future, you shouldn't do that. We'll let it go for now. Or they would just be like, no, that's like, that is too, you, like, if you're trying to essentially take two actions or something like that, it's like, well, no, you can't do that. You only get the one action, then you can do this other thing. Oh, okay. They weren't like, no. This is like hard spike.
It's hard spike.
But yeah, like, they weren't super, like, hardcore about it, and that's what's really nice, though. It's like, how well we had this, our starts really is what drove us to continue to play the game and want to play the game, and make this show that we started now. And that's kind of like the biggest factor of it, and why, like, we wanted to be here and help give some advice, for the starting player, because there's a lot of information in these books. There's a lot. There's a big books.
Oh yeah, but they're great, and I love every single one of them. I get physically excited every time I either buy a new book or I find out that one's being released.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. Like I always get more excited. But honestly, like, you know, it's just anytime we play, like any campaign that we play in, you know, it's like that excitement hasn't gone away in any of the years that I've played it. You know, like I've been playing it for at least a decent while now. Obviously not compared to plenty of other players out there.
Oh yeah.
But between the two of us, like, you know, I've been playing it for a good while. I've switched between D&D and Pathfinder before. And there's just something about the way that I think D&D kind of is set. And Pathfinder is very good because it is set very closely in that realm. That's why it's like a good in-between between 3.5 and 4th edition.
Right.
Because it kind of has things. But now that 5th edition is out, it's like the better version of Pathfinder. Because Pathfinder kind of did things that were like what 5th edition is doing with like the specializations and like class abilities.
True.
Whereas like 3.5 doesn't really have a lot of class abilities. They just have like, you can just pick some feats and then you can make your own, which is good at that in its own way. But it is just one of those things that, like, you know, again, like you really kind of get attached to this whole system if you can really get yourself into it. You know, you just got to really get yourself into it.
Exactly.
But you don't want to, like, there are definitely things you want to avoid. You know, it's like what we mentioned. Like, if you try to make it too complicated, too fast, you're gonna get overwhelmed. It's gonna feel like you never know what's going on.
Exactly. If you go down too far that rabbit hole, you're just gonna take all the fun out of it. Reality, you're just gonna psych yourself out and be like, "This isn't fun at all," and then you're just worried that everything you did was correct. You know?
Yeah, and that's the thing. And kind of my other point as well is, and we've talked about this a number of times, but it's kind of my like final note is really trying not to worry about your stats and like what you're doing. Like, sometimes maybe the character that you made or you got rolled up isn't going to do really good right away, but maybe you can have a lot of fun just, you know, acting out the things that your character does.
Mm-hmm.
And like that can make maybe the game more fun for you than maybe the whole fighting and the combat and all the stats and slaying orcs or whatever. You know, maybe you have a lot more fun just doing the role playing.
Right.
So like, be very open-minded with how the game goes. You know, you may not do a bunch of damage right away, but maybe you will convince, you know, a zombie to follow you. You never know.
Name it Bob.
Bob.
Have a critical, like, emotional moment as Bob sacrifices himself to save you and the party, which happened. They had to pull me away from Bob in order to do this.
But that will do it for this episode. We hope that we could assist anybody who is getting ready to play their first D&D campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And we will see you again next week.
Yeah, this episode's dedicated to Bob the zombie. May he rest in pieces.
Love you, Bob. We out here.
Yep. So
for you. Actually, well, he was undead. So for you.
All right. So this is my buddy Marshall.
This is my buddy Francisco.
And we'll talk to you next time.
See you next time, adventurers.
Goodbye.